My name is Alan Hay. I'm a sergeant with the Arizona Department of Public Safety. I'm currently assigned to our vehicular crimes unit. We investigate all of homicide, vehicular homicide, aggravated assault cases around the state with two squads of detectives.
If you would talk about how you ended up in
So I was in, how I ended up in Las Vegas was I was on my way from I was working off duty at a Cardinals football game, so I was in full uniform in my department vehicle, and I was traveling to Las Vegas to participate as part of our honor guard team. We were going to a conference that was being held by the Arizona Homicide Investigators Association, of which I'm a member, so we were going to support them. The next morning they were going to open and we were going to post the colors, and we did that day. So I was on my way up through State Route 93. As I was in uniform, so I actually stopped for a few collisions on the way to Nevada. When I got to Nevada, I took 215 and then up I-15 towards my hotel. I was staying at the Orleans Hotel at the time. That's where the conference was going to be. And I was coming up on Sunset, or just getting off of 215 onto Sunset, or I'm sorry, onto I-15, coming up to Sunset Boulevard, and you could see the Mandalay Bay Hotel coming up on my right, and traffic. There had been some Nevada Highway Patrol and some different patrol vehicles that were going, we call Code 3 with lights and sirens, that had passed me when I was on 215. And at that time of night, it was dark. I didn't think anything of it. They might have been going to a collision or what have you. So, and then as I got onto I-15, the traffic came to a complete stop. All lanes, I think there was like 7 or 8 lanes of traffic there, and it came to a complete stop. So I thought there was a fatal collision or some serious type collision at that location. So we were stopped. Nevada Highway Patrol and Las Vegas Metro Police Department vehicles were unmarked and marked, were passing on the different emergency lanes. And at one point, then other vehicles, civilian vehicles, started getting into the emergency lanes and basically blocked the entire freeway, so there was no access or any way to get around them. So while I was there, a couple of Nevada Highway Patrol troopers stopped at that location, and I got out of my truck as a lot of people were getting out of their vehicles to see what was going on, and I heard their radio traffic, and then on my mobile data computer it popped up on the news feed that that there was an active shooter at the Mandalay Bay, and at that point I realized that something significant was going on ahead of us there. I'm an active shooter instructor. I've worked for the department as an instructor in that discipline for about 7 years, so I had my full kit with me. I had a rifle, I had those things. I was in uniform, so I felt it was appropriate that if I was able to do so, I would help and respond to assist local law enforcement with any incident that they had. So one Nevada Highway Patrolman was there, or trooper, and he was a SWAT officer. He was getting his full gear on, and we were asking him, should we run up to the scene? Should we run up to the hotel? So we were debating that, getting our gear together, and then a pickup truck, a Ford Ranger, pulled up into the emergency lane and was stopped by traffic. And initially I just looked over and saw some people in the back of it, which didn't alarm me at first, and then after I looked again, I could see that there was legs sticking out where the tailgate was, and it looked like people were laying in the back of the truck, and then there was another lady who was sitting up in the truck. So I went over to it, and the one lady who I've later identified herself as a nurse off duty, she was covered in blood. So I then determined that we had some victims from the actual incident at that location. So I went back to my vehicle, notified my district or my dispatchers on my computer that I was out with part of this incident. And then the one trooper that was kitted up with his equipment, he left, and then it was myself and one Nevada Highway Patrolman. And so we then decided that we needed to deal with this part of the incident. I didn't know if the other people were injured. A lot of times in an active shooter type situation, shock is involved. They may be injured, they may not be injured. And we determined that one of the people that was in the vehicle was deceased. It was a female, adult female was deceased in the vehicle. So we then, I tried to identify them, wrote some information down. I later gave that information to the Nevada Highway Patrol and to Las Vegas Metro PD when I later arrived at the hospital. And I determined that with the trooper that we needed to get them out of here and get them to a hospital. So I started moving vehicles out of the way. There was an area that was a space, a gore point, where there was open space, and I had the civilians that were there at that location moving their vehicles, getting them out of the way so we could turn our vehicles around, because there was literally no way we were going forward. We had to go back wrong way down the freeway. So we got our vehicles turned around. It was a pickup truck with 2 passengers in the passenger compartment, and then the 3 occupants of the back of the pickup truck, the deceased female, her husband, and another person who was helping assist them. Later I found out that these people didn't know each other. The ladies that were driving the truck were at this incident. They got to their car and were leaving and saw these people with the injured woman, and so they loaded her in the truck to try and get her to the hospital, and then they just took the wrong turn, got up the freeway, and did not realize that the freeway was going to be blocked. So so we got the vehicles turned around, and we drove wrong way down the emergency lane, down I-15, back onto 215, and then were able to exit on Las Vegas Boulevard. At that point, the Nevada trooper was blocking the freeway. There was another trooper there that was with a rifle, and they were determined, because at the time we knew that we didn't know it was just a single shooter. Their radio traffic was that there was shooters at the Paris Hotel, there was shooters at the Bellagio, there was shooters, and that all turned out to be, negative contacts. But at the time, we thought that there was a multiple incidents going on, and that's what they were responding to. So we got there. The trooper, I got information from the trooper on where the closest hospital was, because I'm not familiar with the area at all, and then used a mapping software on my phone to then transport them code 3. They were following me in my vehicle that had lights and sirens, and we got to Spring Valley Hospital, and then we pulled into the ambulance bay. I ran into the hospital, got some hospital staff with a gurney. We brought it out. We loaded the deceased female into the vehicle, onto the gurney. Got the other folks into the emergency room, and then I went into the emergency room, and it was quite a scene of chaos. It was the hospital. I have to admit, while it was organized chaos, it was. There was probably 150 to 150 people in the emergency room, laying everywhere that they could put them, and from various injuries, from full gunshot wounds to shrapnel wounds to other types of injuries. So I assisted the hospital staff with the husband and the wife, bringing them into a room. He was calling his family back east where they live, to notify his daughters and family that their mother and their family member was deceased. So I stayed with him because we didn't want to leave him alone. And at that point, once the hospital staff came in, I gave my information of what occurred that I had dealt with to Las Vegas Metro Police Department officers that were at the scene. They advised me that one of their own had been killed that was off duty. So we were discussing that, and then I started leaving the hospital rather, to kind of clear the scene at that point. I was then notified by some other employees that I work with that we had some employees from the department that were injured, and they were probably at that hospital. And could I locate them, because at that time cellular service was completely offline. There was no texting, there was no cellular service. So I was using some social media in order to get through Messenger to get these information out to everybody else. So using that venue, was able to determine after about an hour that the people were in fact at a different hospital, not this hospital, but So I went to Desert Springs Hospital, which is across town. Got to that hospital, and it was in lockdown. It was kind of the same thing that we were seeing at Spring Valley, which was, it was just, they were placing people wherever they could. They were actually bringing city buses full of people to the hospitals and offloading them. So I went to the hospital. I was able to very quickly determine that our employees were in fact there. They took me into the back, and I found them, and they had some injuries, but they were at that point okay. I was able to get some information to my department, to the duty office, to our watch center that our employees were in fact okay, and they had some injuries, but they weren't life-threatening at that point. So I stayed with them until I could get another DPS trooper to come to the hospital to arrange for them to be transported later after they were released to their hotel, or to our hotel if that other hotel, they were staying at the Luxor. So we weren't sure it was in lockdown because it was right next to the Mandalay Bay. And then once that happened, that was at about 3:30 in the morning at that point. I cleared the hospital and then went back to our hotel and got an hour's sleep and did our detail. And so it was quite an ordeal, but nothing that I wouldn't expect any law enforcement officer or anybody else. Las Vegas Metro Police Department, the Nevada Highway Patrol, I give them a lot of kudos. They were phenomenal in their response to this incident, and I was just a small part in the wheels of what occurred. So I'll take any questions you have.
And you mentioned that you were trained in active shooter scenarios, and that you do this training. What did you learn from what happened in Las Vegas?
So what I learned as an active shooter instructor, what did I learn from this? I learned that as training on a regular basis with it, you get you learn from the training that some things just click in, and you have to rely on your training. Really, I wasn't at the scene, so that part of that response didn't kick in. But as far as triage, I was a corpsman in the United States Navy. I've dealt with mass casualty drills, working at Naval Hospital San Diego many years ago, back when I was a young man. And you learn that you have to prioritize what you're going to do, and that was one of the reasons that I realized that these victims needed my help more than the many officers that were already responding to that scene, and I had to prioritize and see what was most important at that particular time. So I made that conscious decision to do that. So I think that's what I took away from it.
You mentioned that you were armed. At that moment, in the moment, were you mentally prepared to take on this guy, not knowing where he was at the time? Were you prepared to have to do that?
And the question is, was I being armed? Was I ready to take on this person? In my training as an active shooter instructor, we have what we call directed threat. You have to respond to stop the violence, because in most active shooter situations, and I say most, once law enforcement gets there and engages the suspect or stops that person or takes their focus away from the innocent victims and takes us on, who we have body armor, we have training, we have the weapons that can take this person on, it keeps those innocent victims from being killed. So whatever we can do, whether we're going to be, just by our presence stopping that person from continuing to fire on innocent people, whatever we can do. But I believe I was ready to do so. That's what I've been trained to do by this department, and I think that I would be ready if the moment came.
Does any amount of training, I mean, you mentioned you stayed with that husband who had lost his wife. Does any amount of training prepare you for that moment when you're standing with him and he's calling his family and telling them their mother's not going to make it? Can you kind of take us through that?
So, do I have any training on dealing with victims and dealing with the emotional issues related to victims when they're calling their family and stuff like that. In our agency, we do what we call next of kin notifications. We do it on a fairly regular basis. Unfortunately, with the amount of deaths attributed to collisions, whether they be criminal or civil fatality collisions around the state and around the country, if a person is killed in another state and they have family in Arizona, our department, we routinely have to go to the homes of people, knock on a door in the middle of the night, and advise them that a family member, a son, a daughter, has been killed by a drunk driver or has been killed in a motor vehicle collision through no fault of, with no fault. So we'd have that training. I've dealt with it unfortunately, on a very regular basis. I've done next of kin notification, I would say 40 or 50 times in my career. You're never really prepared for it because the emotional responses from people are so, they can be from anger to sadness to no emotional response at all. So you have to be prepared for that, and it does take a toll emotionally, even on the officers that are doing it, and especially on the family that is getting that. So I was prepared for it, but it does affect you.
Given the chaos of that night, what was the most challenging part for you personally?
Given the chaos of that night, what was the most challenging for me personally was that a lot of times when I get to a scene as a vehicular crime sergeant, we're dealing with the aftermath. We're dealing with the victims have already been transported to the hospital. We don't have the chaos that is attributed to the initial, that a lot of our troopers that are in uniform, they respond to that scene. They're dealing with those particular issues right then and dealing with that. The unknowns are probably the biggest things that I had to deal with, is because I just wasn't expecting a vehicle to roll up on us with victims in it. And you have to think about what you would do in these different situations. And we teach our officers and our troopers in the academy to play out scenarios in your head. What would you do in this response? What would you do? So that way, when it happens, you don't have a blank slate. You have something to come from your brain or rely on, but you can never play in your head every scenario, and this was a scenario that I would have never expected. So you just had to deal with the situation as it presented itself.
Last question. Anybody?
Real quickly, how long have you been a trooper here?
I've been with the Department of Public Safety for 17 years as a sworn. I've worked in different various locations in Casa Grande and in Metro Phoenix here.
And now that we were several days past the shooting, have you been able to mentally process what's happened? And do you want to share any sentiments about the lives lost and the folks that have suffered, given that you saw a lot of these things firsthand?
Yeah, I think in my line of work, I don't pay attention as much to the news, to the social media parts of it, because the collisions, we a lot know what have occurred. Watching the news, watching the stuff that's going on right now, it takes a little bit more of a toll, because you realize that you're involved in it. I had a very, very small part. There was officers and troopers that saw unbelievable things that day, and they had to deal with unbelievable things that they would have never expected to do, and will probably affect them for many years to come. It always affects you to a certain extent. I don't as working in this field for many years, you see many things that you would say, why? And you can only, I can only guess, because I can't be in the mind of the shooter. I can't be in the mind of the person that was driving drunk and killed a person, or whatever is the case. We can only look at the evidence, the facts, and sometimes there's going to be questions that are unanswered, and it's unfortunate, because I think a lot of people want answers, but unfortunately I don't think we're going to get a whole lot.
Thank you.
Command staff?
Yes.
We have an update on the